expression that Texans use, I wasn't born here, but I got here as soon as I could. But I also have other ties to El Paso. My mother and brother lived in Las Cruces, so we always fly in and out of El Paso. And then my daughter, my baby, Alicia, who is 29, is going to marry a native El Pasoan. Is that what you said? Tony Ortega is from El Paso, and he went to Cathedral High School here. So they met in college, and now he's at Columbia Law School, and they're moving back to Dallas when he graduates this year, and he's going to take the Texas bar. So I'm really excited. His family still lives here in El Paso, so we're going to have a lot of wonderful times here. As Cindy told you, for 3 years I had the great good fortune and the great privilege of leading the largest organization. Okay, is there somebody who can do this? There, okay, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. For girls, 5 to 17 in the country, Girl Scouts of the USA. And some of you, and we kind of reinforced that tonight, who are not active with Girl Scouts day to day, think of Girl Scouts as cookies and crafts and camping. It is that, but really Girl Scouts has always been about creating leaders. And you've seen the mission, you've heard the mission, that Girl Scouts builds girls of courage, confidence, and character. And the fourth C in that mission is community service, because they make the world a better place. So during my 9 years on the Girl Scout board and 3 years as chair, and given these last year's tumultuous financial condition and very partisan bickering in Washington, D.C., it's become increasingly clear to me that the underlying Girl Scouts basic ethics and leadership principles that are embodied in our Girl Scout law serve girls and this great country of ours better than anything else. Ethical leadership is a map to navigate our life journeys. So as a result of my Girl Scout experiences, and because Girl Scouts is all about creating leaders, I wanted to share with you tonight some of the life lessons. I bundled them up, and I've developed what I call my own code, and I call it the Cowgirl Way. It's a little tip to our great state of Texas, but these principles, this code, are what I believe are the most important life lessons, boiled down to just essential elements, the common denominators of what makes great leaders. I was inspired by a book I read some time back by an author named James Owen. And he was a Wall Street veteran who was disgusted by the scandals in investment banking. He said in his preface that Wall Street runs on brains, nerve, and ambition. And after 35 years in the business, he knew he was taking a chance, writing something that came from his heart. Owen found inspiration for his words in working cowboys of the past. He harkened back to a simpler time when your word was your bond. You could be counted on 100% to do what you said you were going to do, and there was a clear line between right and wrong. He said, and I 100% agree with this, that anybody can make money. It's much harder to make a difference. So he used his cowboys as a way to build a code, which, if followed, he thought would redeem the folks with whom he worked in investment banking. He realized that lasting change in his industry, and fundamentally change in our entire society, must come from inside out. One person, one group, one organization at a time. And for me, that organization is Girl Scouts. So this Cowgirl Way, and I noticed in the program tonight, I'm now really going to have to finish this book. I've been working on this book for 5 years. It's not easy to do. I admire writers because it takes a great deal of discipline to sit down and write a book. But I've called this book The Cowgirl Way, and am setting forth 10 main principles by which to live. And tonight, I'm not going to go through all 10, but I'll focus on the top 5. They are: lead your life, blaze a trail, some things are never for sale, be tough but fair, and pay it forward. So let's start with number 1. Now, when I say lead your life, I really want to make it clear what I mean by leadership. It's a word that we hear a lot. But I'm not talking about positional leadership, being a CEO or the COO of a major company, overseeing employees. It's great if you get there, but most of us don't. What I am talking about is leading your life with purpose, leading your life with intentionality, making good decisions, wise choices, and deciding where you're going and having faith in yourself about how you're going to get there. So purposeful and deliberate decisions, the easy ones and the hard ones, and keeping them in sync with a core value. So what I like to say is that a cowgirl doesn't allow anything to stand in her way to doing the right thing. Most people do think that leadership is a position. It's not. It's a choice. If you live a principled life, moral authority will be conferred on you from below instead of a formalized authority being bestowed upon you from above. So whatever we decide to do in our lives, as a full-time parent, a professional in the workplace, an astronaut, a writer, a singer, or in any combination of these things at different times in our lives, we should consciously define ourselves and lead our own way to success and what we cherish. A leader just isn't buffeted about by life events. I have a dear friend who calls life a bumper car. Now you get in and you think you're going to go some particular way, and then something happens, somebody bumps into you and you go yet another way. But we just have to keep reasserting ourselves and start each time anew, knowing eventually where we want to get. Leadership, genuine leadership, real leadership requires character. Character is so powerful. Once we have the right stuff, character, confidence, and courage follow right along. What I think all great leaders have in common is a framework of personal values through which they filter life's events. And therein, I think, lies the secret of success for real leaders. In today's society, far too many people who would be leaders, far too many, do not work from a core set of principles, like those in the Girl Scout law: honesty, fairness, courage, responsibility, respect. Leadership is and always has been about the kind of person we are, not the kinds of things we do. And great leaders, really great leaders, create other leaders and not followers. Next up in the cowgirl way is blaze your own trail, because we can't be afraid to take risks or go off the beaten path. Now, sometimes I'm introduced as a trailblazer, and I've come to think that that's just a term that people use for women over 60. But in many ways, I did have to find my way back, my own way. Now, back in the prehistoric 70s, when I graduated from law school in 1973, and I was working at being the best labor lawyer in Los Angeles, while struggling to find a way to raise a family and improve the world around me. Now, my first real encounter, back in those prehistoric days for many of you in this room, my first real encounter with different treatment because of my gender was when I interviewed for summer law clerk positions in 1972. 7% were the number of women in law school, 7% in my class is 73. So when I visited the firm for which I ultimately worked, I was interviewed by every single lawyer in the firm. There were 34 at the time, all men, and this was just for a summer job. What I found out later was the other guys who were interviewing only met with the hiring committee, 5 lawyers. Obviously, the firm was being very extra careful because I was going to be the first woman professional in the 25-year history of that firm. This firm now has grown into the hundreds. And I understood why they were being so cautious, because I was going to be the first woman, the first Latina in the firm's history. But that's when it finally occurred to me that I was going to have a lot more hurdles to clear than the male associates with whom I was going to be working. But I really still didn't have a notion of the other barriers to advancement along the way. And it took a lot more courage than I thought I had to be true to myself as a person. And it was lonely sometimes back then. I'm sure many of you in this room who are closer to my age understand that. But at times it was empowering. And I often had no choice but to take the road less traveled. And that has made all the difference. I didn't have an older woman, a mentor, who had been through what I was going through to role model how I should act, so I often just made it up as I went along. In fact, I often had countermodels. There were women, lawyers, partners at other firms, and I'll never forget that when I got pregnant with our first child, one of the partners in my firm was married to a partner in another firm, and she said, you know, Patricia, when you have the baby, I want you to use this agency I found. They just got great nannies there. I have just the best nanny now. She gets the girls down before I come home. And I looked at her and I thought, I don't want that. If anybody's going to screw up my kids, I want it to be me. I don't want it to be a nanny, right? So I decided that it would be either me or my husband, and we just had to figure out some strategies for us to be able to parent as we wanted. And, you know, it was a time of adjustment for me and this law firm I went to, because as I mentioned, I did get pregnant, and one of the things that kept people from hiring women in the 70s was because they thought, once we hire her and we invest all this time and money, the first thing she'll do is get pregnant and stop working. So after a year, yes, I got pregnant. And I remember going in to see the senior partner and telling him I was pregnant. And then there were other things that happened. They had no policies, so of course I just was able to take 3 months off with no pay and no benefits. But I had my job when I went back. And I was determined. I was living in Los Angeles then, my husband and I was a La Leche leader. And was determined my daughter was never going to have a bottle. So my husband used to have to bring her to the office. And I had every lawyer had a little sign on the door, and you hit it one way, it would turn red, and then do not disturb. So Michael, my husband, who sent me to law school, I tell people he sent me to law school because when we married my junior year of college, and he was in law school then. And he said, you know, you're winning all the arguments. I was going to go on to graduate school. And he said, you're winning all the arguments at home. I think when you graduate, you ought to go to law school. You put that skill to some use. So he sent me to law school many years ago. And Michael was, well, anyway, he'd bring in our daughter, and I call her the daughter, formerly known as Ashley, because she changed her name when she was 18, and that's another very long story. She's now 39, and I'm still not over it. But he brought her in one night for me to nurse, and I had decided not to go to a labor department meeting because I needed to finish a memo for the senior partner. And I was sitting there, and there's discrete ways of nursing and not so discrete ways of nursing. And because in those days, and this is, I know many of you have never heard of this, a dictaphone is what I used. It was a piece of machinery that had reels in it. And you'd use a microphone and dictate into it, and then give this tape to your assistant to type up. And so I was nursing in a non-discrete way and dictating into this dictaphone. And the door burst open, even though I had it on Do Not Disturb, and the senior partner of the labor department said, when he saw what he saw, he got very embarrassed. And he said, Patricia, you don't have to come to the labor department meeting. And I said, Paul, I hadn't planned on it. So he turned on his heel, slammed the door, and went back to the department meeting and said, you know, you're not the only associate in town who can lactate and dictate at the same time. True story. True story. So we really had to learn from each other how to accommodate parenting. I always had trouble with when I had, not trouble, but I had incidents occur when I had children. I had a son and a daughter, a son, and then my third child, Alicia, the one who's getting married to the person from El Paso, to Tony, who's a wonderful young man. I used to bring her to the office. I was on the labor board. It was a time of lousy jokes, actually. I was the first labor board member, and so far I've been the only labor board member to have had a baby while on the labor board. Bad jokes. Wall Street Journal, you know that column in the Wall Street Journal that talks, I don't know what day it comes on, but it sort of gives little snippets about government, and they said that we were down to 3 board members because the Senate refused to confirm 2 Republican appointments. I was appointed as a Democrat. And they said there's no truth to the rumor that board member Dennis is so disgusted by the fact the Senate won't confirm the 2 Republicans that she's decided to grow her own. So that's the first page in my daughter's baby book, Alicia's baby book, because, you know, I decided that Ronald Reagan was running on family values, so I just brought her into the office to nurse her, because they weren't going to fire me for that. I mean, that's in keeping with family values. So at the time, though, when all these, going through my professional life, I didn't feel like I was blazing a trail. I was just really trying to get through each day. Just trying to get through each new challenge and feeling my way. The ultimate trailblazer for me is the original Girl Scout, the Girl Scouts founder, Juliette Gordon Low. I love this woman. She was an amazing, amazing woman, and there are books about her, and I really encourage you, if you ever get kind of down and think, God, life is hard, read about what Juliette Gordon Low overcame. In 1912, Lord Baden-Powell began Boy Scouts. The rest of the world, in every country, the girls are called Girl Guides, because that is what Lord Baden-Powell's wife and he decided that they would be the concomitant group. Juliette Gordon Low said, if they're Boy Scouts, we're going to be Girl Scouts in the United States. I love that. I mean, she really wanted parity. She wanted whatever it was for the boys, it was good enough for the girls. She started Girl Scouts with a string of natural pearls because her husband had found a mistress, took her money, because in those days it went to men and husbands and not wives. And so she sold her string of natural pearls to start a 12-girl group in Savannah, Georgia. It had girls with disability, it had racial diversity. And there's Senator Letitia Van de Putte from San Antonio. She and I have shared many dances together, and she says Girl Scouts was the only place that a little Mexican girl like her could play with girls from the other side. With white Anglo girls, with black girls, with you name it. And what an extraordinary thing in 1912. What an extraordinary thing. She said she could hang out with the girls from other places. So the barriers I hurdled early in my career, and the barriers that Juliette Gordon Low faced, do still exist today in different forms and in different degrees. But it's my fervent hope that the girls of future generations will make it even further than we who've come before them. With all of us blazing more trails, I know they will. So number 3 in the Cowgirl Way is some things should never, ever be for sale. Each one of us has core values, and we should never compromise them, not for anything or anyone. Because real cowgirls know the line between right and wrong does not get crossed. Unfortunately, I really feel these days we have a huge deficit of leaders with real leadership qualities like character and honesty and integrity. And thank God, and thank goodness, that Juliette Gordon Low had them. She wouldn't allow anyone to deflect her. She got deaf in one ear. Rice got into her ear during her wedding. Something went wrong, and she became deaf. She had breast cancer. She didn't start Girl Scouts until she was 52. And she was from a higher society, rung in Charleston society. And so people in her societal group were critical of her for wanting to do this for the girls of Savannah. But she put 12 girls in bloomers, taught them to play basketball and hike through the woods. The very first badge was the aviator badge, the very first badge. I do also like the thing about tying up burglars. I thought that was actually good.